Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. This is season 4, where we're focusing on case acceptance. Maybe you've thought about switching to Blue Sky Bio's implants, but you're not sure because you haven't had the chance to try them out in person and see for yourself. So I'm the type that when I'm on Amazon, when I'm on anything, I'm going to look at the reviews. I'm going to read the reviews, the good reviews, the bad reviews. I want to know exactly what I'm getting myself into. So I went on the 365 Digital Dentistry Facebook page and found a post of someone who said that they were finally looking to switch to Blue Sky Bio's implants. And someone asked on that thread, what makes one want to use Blue Sky Bio's implants over other clone or compatible systems? And what do they offer that larger name brand implants don't offer? I loved the responses here. This was awesome. One of the first responses was, better implants, better people, cost savings. Another one said, easy ordering, cheaper, cross-compatibility, innovation in the DIY CAD guided realm. Wade Pilling said, in my opinion, better service, better pricing, better cutting-edge technology, better implant design, better platform design, and a model that is kinder to general dentists. And then Baron Grutter said, my reason for liking the Blue Sky Bio Max line over Nobel, number 1 was cost, $99 to $135 for the implant. Number 2, 30% stronger platform design. He's never seen one of the Blue Sky Bio implants flower or split during placement, whereas some of the narrow platforms of other brands have done that in the past. Number 3, universal platform with a much better inventory, so a lot better options. Number 4, Dr. Sheldon and Albert, who are experienced clinicians who will help with nothing in return. So fantastic support at Blue Sky Bio. Number 5, ease of ordering. And number 6, no rep pressure. And he said these reasons are not necessarily listed in order of importance, but in order of most significant difference. So you can see that these people who have been placing these implants, they love the cost, they love the convenience. In many cases, they believe they're actually a superior implant. To try out your first set of Blue Sky Bio implants, go to blueskybio.com/store and check out their 6 lines of cutting-edge dental implants and compatible parts.
Okay, I have with us the guest of the most popular episode in the history of the Shared Practices podcast, Dr. Derek Williams. How's it going today, Derek?
Good. I love that intro.
I didn't tell you about that. I just thought of it right now.
That was good.
So, for those of you that don't know Derek and I are really good friends, and we met. I was a first-year dental student, and you were a third-year dental student, and we became really, really good friends through email, actually, which is weird, but Derek went on and bought a practice, and about 2 weeks or 3 weeks after he closed on that office as a new grad, him and Richard did an episode, and that was, I think, our first full episode on the show, or maybe like our third. And something about that episode is just the most downloaded one that we've ever released. And since then, we've had Derek on a couple more times. How's it going, Derek?
Good. Glad to be here. Always happy.
So most of our audience knows you, more people than most. So why don't you go ahead and give us an update on what you guys are doing? And if they missed your last episode, talk about TLP with Justin.
Yeah. So it's now been a year since I've partnered with Justin. It's been an awesome year. It's been super fun for me to start working with new dentists. I mean, I feel like I've always really enjoyed networking with others, and now I'm getting to do it in a more personal way. That's, we're seeing some really cool results in dentists' practices and in time off, stuff like that. Really, really, really cool for me. It's almost like I get to experience things all over again by experiencing success through dentists that I'm working with.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm obviously out of the two of us, Justin and I'm the younger one, newer in dentistry. So I have kind of taken on a role in helping the newer dentists. So not all of them, but most of the dentists that I'm working with are either newer in practice. They've bought their practice sometime within the last year or two. A lot of them I start working with, like a month before closing seems to be a pretty ideal time to get a plan together and kind of establish a foundation for moving through the coaching process. But one thing that Justin and I have found is we'll start talking to people, they'll reach out to us and, hey, I've got a practice, I just closed, or, something like that. And we have kind of seen some less than ideal things about these situations. So we've thought, the thought in our minds is if we could have just kind of been in contact or kind of worked with this person a few months before and been able to kind of guide a little bit in looking at different practices, here's the pros and cons, things like that, could really help out the client. And we've also had some requests from people, hey, I'm really excited to get into ownership. I'm just, I think I have a lot of the know-how, but I just need some guidance. So I've actually started working with some dentists that are not in ownership yet and helping them to evaluate practices, to decide between them. I've had most of them actually using the ownership accelerator, which has been really helpful. But it's been really kind of another exciting thing for me. It's made me kind of remember how much I love acquisitions and kind of the negotiation process and everything that happens. So yeah, I mean, I know we're going to get into case acceptance a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of update that and kind of share a little bit more about my background so far in becoming more involved in acquisitions with TLP.
That's awesome. And for those of our listeners who've been following your personal practice, what's going on in Lufkin?
So we just finished off 2018. We were just a little shy. My goal was 1.6. We were a little bit shy of that, pretty close, and it was all on 3 days a week with, several weeks of vacation in there. So the practice continues to go well. And in the last 6 months of the year, we did about $1,000 a day more than the first 6 months of the year. So we're continuing to grow. So it's a good sign. Things are going well.
So what do you attribute that growth to, this far into, I mean, it's not like you're super far into ownership, but, this far into ownership, what would you attribute that amount of growth to?
I think a big thing, which I think I mentioned this in the last interview, but a big thing for 2018 for my office was implementing the 20% bonus system. And this really did a lot of wonders in helping my staff to see things in a new light. All of us as owners would love for our staff to start seeing things through an owner's perspective. And I've always tried to kind of train my staff and help them to kind of see things how I see it. But by implementing the 20% bonus system where, if we do above X amount, they all share 20% of it so that my payroll stays at 20%. But by doing that, the staff are now paying attention and they are noticing specifically what they can each do in their individual roles to help us to reach our goals. So this year has been kind of a big growth period for them in seeing what they can do as far as helping case acceptance, helping patients understand treatment, helping to get the schedule as efficient and productive as possible, working in emergencies. All of these little things that used to be just part of their job is now what they are seeing as a way that our practice can treat more patients and be more successful.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the way that you guys do that. And, I think the thing that I struggle with, and, off topic here as I talk about my own situation, is as we continue to add team members, that payroll period tends to fluctuate. What do you guys typically recommend waiting until your team is more stable before implementing a policy like that? Or how do you manage it with new hires?
Yeah. So I guess there's kind of different situations, and it kind of depends on when you implement this policy. If you haven't implemented it yet, you definitely want to get to a point where you're seeing some stability as far as your payroll percentage. You don't want to start implementing this when, payroll is pretty high, or, you're still trying to make a lot of changes and not sure where things are going to be at. You want to implement this, in my opinion, at a point when you can predictably say, okay, payroll is going to be at this percent, plus or minus, maybe 1 or 2%. At that point, it's a good point to implement that, because you can kind of know what to expect and how to implement it, how to present it to employees. Then the nice thing about if you had implemented that previous to hiring new employees is that, well, for example, so in my practice, I only have one front desk. And there's been a couple times where, the front desk has asked me, hey, can we get someone to just, help me out with this, maybe work part-time or, such and such, stuff like this. And I've always been open to it, and I've explained it to the staff. Hey, this is what we're looking at. Do remember that if we do hire another person, then that's going to take our payroll a little bit higher. So we will have to do X amount more to meet our same 20% system. And when the staff understand that, and again, they're starting to see things from an owner perspective. So it's not that we're necessarily against hiring someone else, but we want to make sure that if we're doing it, we believe, not just me as the owner, but the staff, because in this system, we're all on the same team. But we want to make sure that if we're going to make this hire, that it is in fact going to help us to become more productive.
I love that. All right, everybody, I'll move on from the topic of wondering what George wants to know, and we'll move on to the topic of case acceptance. So I think, Derek, you've had a very unique situation. So for anybody who didn't listen to any of Derek's previous episodes, he bought an office from a dentist in Lufkin, which is 2 hours north of Houston. It's a more, like what, the population is like 100,000 people?
The county is about 100,000. Lufkin itself is about 40,000.
Okay, whoops. So, a smaller town in Texas, and he walked in and dentistry was just done differently than he would have done it, and so he had a lot of conversations with patients about his way of treatment, which was different than what they were accustomed to. So I think he's gained a lot of very valuable experience in, as a new owner, walking into a practice where maybe you would treat a patient differently than the previous doctor would. How do you handle those conversations? Is that accurate to say, Derek?
Yeah, for sure. That's a good way to put it.
And I've walked into the same thing. My wife and I are wrapping up, I think, month 7 of our acquisition. So, I've seen everybody through recall once, and every time you meet somebody for the first time, it's just a little bit uncomfortable. And so, Derek, why don't you go ahead and talk about your experience walking into an office, some clinical examples of some things that you saw and how you handled those certain conversations?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I guess I'll preface with this. There's most consultants, most people that I talked to told me, look, get into this practice, and for the first year or two, you don't really want to be bringing up treatment that you think patients need to have done, unless it's, obvious decay, stuff like that. So I was a little bit hesitant, didn't know, exactly how I was going to find this balance. Really was Justin in the beginning that helped me to kind of understand a few things. And one of them is, look, if you think they need the work, then they need the work. It doesn't make a difference how long you've known them or what your relationship is with them. That might change how you present it and, how comfortable that might be in certain situations, but it doesn't change the fact that they need the work done. So that was an important thing for me to understand. And it's a lot of what I try to convey to new dentists as well. It can be uncomfortable. And like you said, those first few months, every single time you walk in, it's somebody new, and you've basically all day long, you're just meeting new people. For me, I'm a little bit more introverted, and so that can be quite taxing and draining.
Extroverted, and it's super taxing. I mean, there's no way around it. Yeah, it's super exhausting meeting like 20 people a day.
Yeah. So to have that going on, and then to add on top of that, integrating some possibly uncomfortable situations where you're talking about work that patients might need to be done is challenging. But I mean, so some very common scenarios for me in the beginning were just seeing teeth with, MODBLs that, got cracks and are falling apart, or, big abrasive lesions on the facial, some of these different scenarios, and even some really undiagnosed perio, a lot of different types of things coming in, and some of them obviously more serious than others. But I felt like even the things that weren't as serious, I feel like it's still my job to communicate what I'm seeing with the patient. If the patient decides not to do anything about it, that's okay. That's their decision. But really, honestly, ethically, it's my job to present them with a situation where they can make a decision.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on what you're saying. For me, walking into an office, I did assume that I learned it from Paul Goodman. He was the one that told me to do this. where you walk in and you're very conservative with patients, and only if something's really bad do you mention it. And about a month in, my schedule is wide open because I'm not telling patients they don't. I'm not diagnosing anything, and so I have nothing to do. And I think that's kind of where it clicked for me, where I need to be more upfront with people and tell them what I'm seeing, because this way is not what the sellers were doing in the first place, and it's not really what's going to work for me. And so I kind of had that turning point too. But I think one thing that makes me uncomfortable still is walking into an exam, and if there's an overwhelming amount of treatment that needs to be done, for me, I guess everyone has that number of, crowns or whatever it is that makes them uncomfortable, or I guess maybe not. But for me, I find that when the treatment plan gets larger and this patient has no idea, that's where it starts to get a bit uncomfortable for me. So how did you handle a situation where you walk into a room and a patient has, I don't want a large amount of treatment that they're unaware of? What are some methods that you use to approach that with the patient?
Yeah, great question. I think it's okay to acknowledge that that you're slightly uncomfortable bringing this up, or so a common thing for me to say would be something like, let's say I'll put the pictures up on the TV screen, and I'm just going to tell them, I'm going to say, look, I don't want you to be overwhelmed. I'm going to go over some treatment with you. I'm going to kind of show you some pictures and explain what's going on and give you some options and let you decide. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. This is probably going to seem like a lot, but really, honestly, we don't have to do any of it. This is completely your decision. My goal as your dentist is just to show you exactly what's going on and let you know what could be coming down the road and help you to decide what you would like to do. So I feel like when you approach the situation in that light, it takes the pressure off the patient. I think all of us have felt that situation where we feel like we're getting sold to, we're kind of getting pushed to go a certain direction. And at least, for me and my patients, I feel like as soon as I take the pressure off and say, look, honestly, we don't have to do anything, but I feel like it's at least my job to communicate this with you and let you make the decision. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I wasn't at least doing my job and communicating this to you. So when we kind of establish that groundwork and that foundation for what our relationship is like, it's much easier to proceed, because then the patient is taking responsibility for what's in their mouth. They're not feeling pressure from me to move forward to do something. They're looking at the pros and cons of these different routes, these different ways we can go in order to decide what they want to do.
So what's a typical response you hear from a patient to that statement? Like, you go through, let's just say you say that, and then I'm assuming they'll just like kind of nod their head in agreement. And then you'll go through and you'll let them know that they have, like, I don't know, they need like 6 crowns, and so what is the typical response that a patient would say?
I think a typical response would be, a lot of times people will look at the pictures and they'll say, the other thing that's great about pictures is that it helps patients to take responsibility. Oh, that's my tooth. Yeah, that's your tooth. So when they see the pictures, it helps them to take responsibility and understand that it's them. It's not me just trying to tell them what it looks like and sell them. But so a typical response is, something like that. Wow, I didn't realize my teeth were that bad. So again, I love that statement because they're taking ownership again for it. It's not, oh gosh, you're bringing this on me really fast, or this dentist is super aggressive. It's, wow, I didn't know my teeth were in this type of condition. That's a common response. There are patients that, feel like, you know what, if it's not hurting me, it's not bothering me, I'm not doing anything. And, that's an understandable response too. And I don't necessarily try and push them, but I do let them know that pain is not always a great indicator. People can have a tooth break or have, things go south and end up having to lose teeth without ever really getting pain as a warning. So hopefully that answers, but those are kind of a couple of the common responses that I get.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, I always try to make them aware of things. And then, do you ever prioritize?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's another good way to do it, especially if, you're walking in on something that seems like a lot of work. And you don't necessarily have to create a plan that only addresses certain things and then gets to others later. Some patients may want to address everything altogether, but if it comes down to the patient and what the priorities are. But a lot of times, yes, I'll tell them these are the things that are most urgent. If we could only do certain things, this is what I would focus on and do first. If you want to get it all done, we can do that as well. And ask the patient, what are their preferences on things, and kind of move forward through it that way.
I love that.
I am so proud that we still have Q Optics as a sponsor for the Shared Practices podcast. It's been almost 2 years and I'm still using my 4.5x Prism loops. They're custom through the lens, they're beautiful, people like them, I get compliments on them, but more than anything, I love the magnification. Some people are hesitant to jump up from 2.5 to 3.5, maybe to 4 or even 4.5. I have never met someone who said, you know what, I really wish I could see less when I'm doing dentistry. I really just if there's decay still there, I don't want to know. I just want to close this tooth up. You should want to see as much as possible. It's going to make your preps better. It's going to make your life better. You're going to see more. You're going to catch more. The only person I can give a pass to, we had someone buy some loops and share them on our Facebook page. And I was like, oh no, why didn't you get the Prisms? Why didn't you get the 3.5, 4.5? He's like, well, I'm a pediatric dentist. I was like, fine, okay, you get a pass. You can buy normal Q Optics loops. Everyone else, you should be buying 3.5 plus. You're not gonna regret it. So if you're finally ready to upgrade, email sales@qoptics.com and use the promo code SP19, as in Shared Practices SP19, for a discount off your loops and light combo.
So, Derek, I have a question for you. So, walking into an acquisition, I guess my experience as I'm seeing my own recalls again is I think for the first 6 months, there's a lot of new diagnosis off of your existing recall patients because that's the first time you're seeing them. And so, something that you noticed that maybe the previous doctor didn't. And then, as you start seeing those people again, is that where you started feeling the necessity for new patients?
Oh, that's a good point. I think it's been a mixture. I mean, I think really ever since the beginning, honestly, when I first started, there was a lot of work to be done. I mean, I think my very first full month, we did like around 80,000, and historically they had averaged 47,000 a month. So we increased quite a bit just from, and it wasn't because I was getting a whole bunch of new patients. It was just from more work was being diagnosed and completed. So that first round, that first 6 months, those patients that were, just kind of the more proactive ones that don't really take a lot of coaxing, were able to go ahead and finish treatment. And then in the second round of things, I started to see some patients that were like, okay, he's still here, people haven't said anything horrible, he hasn't killed anyone yet. Okay, I'll go ahead and get the work done. So you kind of go through a little phase of that. But I think you're right, though. As I became more productive, schedule became more productive, and we possibly had less possible dental work coming out of hygiene, that may be a point where you start to feel the need for new patients. I'm trying to remember exactly when we started first kind of sending out some mailers and doing a little bit more advertising. But I think it was, somewhere around probably 6 to 9 months that began.
Yeah, I track this pretty closely. And, for me, diagnosis is something that I track a lot. And I found that, once I hit my recalls, then, I saw the drop off in, your diagnosis off of your existing patients.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then I have a question for you. One thing that I've heavily relied on, and I talked about this on the show and in our course, I talk about it a lot, is my hygienists, because they have a long-standing relationship with these patients. And, they are my way of kind of bridging that gap between new dentist and new patient. And for me, I almost utilize them immediately right away. Within a couple weeks, we were really up and running in hygiene. When did you really start to work with your hygienists on the co-diagnosis and having them begin that conversation for you?
Yeah, Good question. And I think that's really one area that you have done really well. As Justin and I have done some calls with you, and seems like you've really kind of knocked it out of the park as far as communicating, getting on the same page with your hygienists, and helping them to really get on top of things and to do all the prep work before you go in the exam room.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. So let me take a step back first, and then I'll talk about hygiene. So one thing that I believe in this situation in an acquisition is that really when you step into this situation, not only are you having to sell yourself to patients, but you're having to sell yourself to the staff. The staff have become acclimated and comfortable with the previous dentist there, and you're new. Most likely you're going to do things differently and have different suggestions and different ways that you like to work through things. And it's very important for you to show that you care about staff, that you try and work through problems, that you have the type of leadership skills. One thing in my lecture in the case acceptance course, I talk about leadership skills, and in Jim Collins' book Good to Great, he talks about level 5 leaders, that basically having humility and very strong will, those two things combined leads to a level 5 leader. And in this situation, what that means is that with your staff, as you're coming into this acquisition and this whole transition process, you have a very strong will about certain things that you know that are right. For example, you're treating patients the way that you believe is the very best way, with, whether that's x-rays that they should have taken, or perio protocol, or treatment recommendations, those types of things you have a very strong will about. Or maybe there's a policy that you want to implement with your staff. You have a very strong will about certain types of things. But you also have to have a lot of humility. You have to be willing to be able to listen to staff, and when they have issues and concerns about something that you want to implement, that you're not just saying, look, guys, it's my practice. I am the boss. We need to do this. This is how we're doing it. If you don't like it, get out. You have to be willing to listen and to understand their concerns and be able to try and work through those things. All of that being said, when you're doing this, the reason why it's important to sell yourself with all your staff and not just with the hygienist, because when a patient comes in and you give them a treatment plan, patients are going to be interacting with everyone. Whether that patient is coming in for emergency exam and they're seeing the dentist and kind of having the assistant being the one by their side, or they're coming in for a cleaning and having the hygienist be the one. But a lot of those hygiene patients are then going up front, man, I got this treatment plan. I saw these pictures of my teeth and stuff. Do you really think this is what's going on? Like, do you really think Dr. Williams is on cue with all these things? And if all your staff are not on board and don't have that level of trust and understanding, then there's going to be little weak links that are going to significantly hinder your case acceptance.
I'm really happy you said that. In my experience as well, yeah, a lot of patients, they ask the front desk, how's the new doctor? Or the assistant, and they'll always ask those types of questions. And yeah, I totally agree with you. Buy-in from the entire team on you as a person and you as a treatment planner are very, very important.
Totally. But then getting to your point about focusing on the hygienist, I do think that the hygienists, by and large, have the most important role in the practice as far as helping the patients, and can make the biggest difference in case acceptance, probably than other staff members.
Can I challenge you for a second?
Oh, yeah, sure.
My belief on this, and I'm like far on the side of the hygienist. I'm like a politician that's like super into the hygienist on this topic. I would argue that the hygienist has more to do with the case acceptance than, you could put a hygienist with a terrible dentist. And if the hygienist is really good at what she does, that dentist is going to get great case acceptance.
Yeah.
I think that I think the hygienist is that impactful.
Yeah, I agree. What I was going to say next is that there's a lot of people that really focus a lot on improving and increasing your hygiene and preventive production, which I'm not going to say that that's not important, because you definitely want to focus on every potential way to grow that you can. But in my practice, the most important thing that my hygienists can do as far as helping our practice to stay healthy is to have a good relationship with patients and be discussing treatment and options with them before I come into the room. Their number one purpose in my practice is to be able to feed me dentistry to do. It's all of the hygiene, obviously all the preventive is very important. But if I don't have hygienists that are doing that, I'm going to have a more difficult time staying busy.
Preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
So at what point, so how did you do it? How did you kind of start that relationship with the hygienists?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I was not real great at it in the beginning, and like you, I was brand new coming right out of school, and I wasn't 100% sure in everything that I was recommending in the beginning. So that was a little bit challenging for me, because, one patient I would maybe recommend something, and then a different patient it would be a little bit different, the next week, because I had changed a little bit of my thinking philosophy. And so it was probably difficult for my hygienist to understand what I was going for in the beginning. So most dentists, hopefully that's not an issue, because most dentists will be going into ownership having already practiced for at least 6 months or a year or so, to be able to kind of nail down those clinical things first.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to, that's not just you. In my experience, I was the exact same way, at least for the first few months. Like I looked at, as some patients, I diagnosed something when I first started and they started doing it later. And I looked at them like, I don't know if I totally agree with my initial diagnosis on this. And yeah, I think that's a very normal thing for any. So if a dental student's out there like wondering what to expect as a new grad, unsure in your own diagnosis on a regular basis is very much normal.
Yeah. Yeah. I got an email from a dental student just a couple days ago, and he was asking me about his situation and stuff. And a lot of people, I've said this before, but a lot of people kind of look at my story or your story and others that have come right out of school and, really done pretty well. And they think, oh yeah, that's what I should do. But in general, I encourage people to go get a job, find the very best associateship you can, where you're busy, you're getting compensated well, and get a little bit of mentorship. And, even if it's a minimum of, 6 months, that's going to go a really long way in helping you to have increased confidence when you're in ownership.
I'll piggyback on this just because we've never actually got to have a conversation about it since we've both done it. I have mixed feelings on it, to be honest, because I feel like on one hand, that track of being 6 months, and whoever's going to buy a practice out of school, there's nothing we're going to say to dissuade them. They're going to do it or not do it, but I don't know. I mean, I feel like if you buy a practice and 6 months later, you've gone through probably the worst 6 months of your life. And then on the other side of it, you're much further along in your career than you would be otherwise. So I think it's, I don't think it's as cut and dry as people try to make it seem like there's one right track or the other. I think the one thing that I did not expect, that I want to see if this happened to you too, is my clinical development totally stalled. I am like, I don't do any specialty procedures, and I'm very, very standard in what I do because I didn't go get an associateship where I could grow clinically. I think that's the one area that, that's the biggest sacrifice, in my opinion, is the lack of clinical growth as a new owner.
Yeah, let me respond to your first comment first. I agree mostly. I think, and that's honestly, that's what I told the student. He was asking and a little bit unsure, and I said, if you're not pretty confident that this is the route you're going to go, owning right out of school, then it's probably not right for you, because most of the people that come out owning right out of school and do well, they're not going to go any other direction. But so yeah, there's not one right way for everyone. But if I have to make a blanket statement, I would rather someone come out of school and get an associateship for at least 6 months to a year rather than telling everyone that, hey, you can get into ownership and it can work out.
No, I agree with that. So walking out into an office without a GPR, without any associateship, anything, right out of school, I feel like the amount that I diagnose is less, and I feel like the amount that I can do is less as a whole because I just haven't had that time to grow clinically. And I feel like that's I did not realize I was making that compromise. I would have still done it, but that was one thing I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. I I haven't experienced that as much. Part of it may have to do with, I went to Creighton and I was probably one of those go-getters in my class that, tried to do as much specialty procedures as possible, try to do as much endo as possible, many surgical extractions and as many implants as I could. And I'm doing all those procedures. I'm doing molar endo. I'm doing, a decent amount of surgical extractions, some impacted thirds, and doing the more simple implant cases. That's not to say that it came without hiccups. I think my first couple weeks in, I perfed a tooth, number 19, doing molar endo, perfed out the distal side, and had to send the patient to the endodontist, and it was a tough experience, but it helped me. I did become a little bit more conservative at that point, but by choosing my cases a little bit more wisely at that point, helped me to get experience, become more comfortable, and then push myself again a little bit to the next level. So I'm still doing a lot of those procedures, but it's it kind of go back and forth a little bit sometimes as far as what I'm comfortable clinically doing.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'm the type of person that if I'm not comfortable doing the procedure, I'm not going to do it for the first time in my practice with my patient long term. I think for me that's the part that really slowed me down is the lack of, somebody to bail me out or if I don't feel 100% confident in my ability to complete the procedure successfully, I just would rather not do it. So I also think that me personally as a dentist, I've never really taken a lot of risks even in school. And so that's probably the reason why I am the way I am in practice. But yeah, I mean, that's good to know that it's not everybody. Because I think you and Steve, your buddy from Creighton that also bought a practice out of school, are both relatively developed clinically.
Yeah, and Steve and I both talked during dental school, and basically we wanted to do everything under the sun, anything that any patient could possibly need, no matter how difficult. We wanted to be the ones in there to do it because, I I hate to say this, but you have no liability in dental school. So, I mean, that's not to say that I wasn't trying to do my very best, but I wanted to do everything that they would give me and learn as much as possible because that was a situation where I would have someone to back me up. And, in the last 6 to 8 months in dental school, I was constantly thinking in my head as I'm diagnosing and treatment planning and performing treatments on my patients, I'm thinking, okay, would I be willing to do this in private practice or would I refer it out? Or, during a case, if I hit kind of a roadblock, I'm trying to think of everything that I can on my own to try and get through it before I, just go and grab the instructor. I wanted to be as a proactive learner as possible to get the most out of my education, to know, how I was going to be able to approach that in private practice, just because I knew I was going to come out of the gate in ownership.
I love that. And yeah, I'll stop derailing this conversation. I feel like I've been doing that a lot this episode. So I did want to wrap up on the kind of the topic of, what you think, if there was one thing that makes the biggest difference in your whole idea of case acceptance and in your practice on how it works, what would you think is, I guess, what about what you do in your practice is successful with your ability to relate to patients?
I think I'll pick two things, and we've already discussed them, but I'll just reiterate them. The first is making sure that all of your staff are on your side, that they understand why you would recommend something, or they're going to back you up, and they really believe you. They're not just backing you up just because you're the boss. they're backing you up because they really believe that what you're doing is the best thing for the patient. That's first. The second thing would be basically that perspective that I provided that allows you as the dentist to just be sort of the mediator in between the patient and what's really going on in their mouth. And when you are the mediator and you're basically just saying that you're trying to help them find solutions and something that is going to make them happy long term, then that takes the pressure off of them as far as feeling pressured to go forward and to move forward with treatment. Instead of feeling pressure from you, they're seeing the urgency, or they're realizing that it is something that they want to do because of the situation that they are in, helping them take ownership for their health and their decisions is ultimately what I believe helps my patients to say yes to treatment.
I love that. I think it almost brings it back to there's two conversations going on. There's you and the patient, and then there's you in your head. And having the right mindset about it and being comfortable telling them what you see is just as important as your ability to communicate that to the patient.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. That's a good summary.
So, Derek, do you have anything you want to leave our audience with?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we kind of went through and kind of hit the important parts of what I wanted to say. The other thing I would reiterate is that a lot of times dentists may think that is their case acceptance, when a lot of times, like you said, like we discussed in the beginning, it has to do with the diagnosis and being willing to discuss treatment that should be done. And it's still, I thought that this would go away. I thought that this would become easy, that there would, at some point it would be like, just always easy for me to bring up treatment that could be done or needs to be done and to talk about it with the patient. But it's still day in, day out. There's times when I think, oh, this patient just got a crown. They're not going to want to hear this from me. Or, this patient's already said this, so they're probably not going to want to hear. Maybe I just shouldn't say anything. We can always make excuses in our head. But like I said, for me, it goes back to continuing to be ethical, and that my job is just to present options and to let them know what I'm seeing. If I don't at least present that to them and have that conversation and let them say yes or no, I'm not doing my job.
I love that. And I think, as a TLP client, I think the biggest reason, so the whole like work 3 days and make as much as you work 5 days, like I think people don't get that until they start doing it themselves. But it's the ability to stay mentally fresh, to have those conversations, is what makes the difference, in my opinion. It's the hardest thing it's a really exhausting, in my opinion, to walk into an exam and to be that engaged every single time. And if you're working a lot and you don't take enough vacation, you don't do what you need to do for yourself, then ultimately you're just not going to do that. And that's going to impact your ability to stay productive. Is that like a good summary of like a very TLP core concept?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Essentially that you try and become more efficient to be able to have more time to decompress. And it's almost like this continuous feedback loop where both of them are reinforcing and helping each other. So the more productive that you're becoming in your practice each day is allowing you to have more time with your family or with hobbies, whatever you enjoy. And that time doing those things that you love is helping you to become a more engaged and intentional dentist in your practice.
I love that, because what ends up happening is you start wanting to relax at work. You're like, well, I'm working so much and I got to take my breaks here when I'm doing my exams, just chat with the patient, take it easy. And that's ultimately going to keep you at the office a lot more. So I love that. And, as I've been working with you guys, I've kind of seen the effects of it, and it's very powerful. So I think that's one of the most, and I think that's like, people think like when you tell somebody and work on your diagnosis, people don't always get that.
Yeah.
Like, we're not telling you to diagnose differently. We're telling you to diagnose everything that you see.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big distinction.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting that you say that, because I remember when I was, a few months into ownership and I was talking with Justin actually put the idea. I had one full-time hygienist 4 days a week, and then I had another part-time hygienist that was 2 days a week. So we had a total of 6 hygiene days, and those on the days where I had 2 hygienists, it was pretty busy. And Justin asked me, it looked like we could probably bring the other hygienist full-time, have it work out pretty well. And Justin asked me about it, and I said, man, I mean, I could do that, but I really like those 2 days, where I only have one hygienist, that I can relax a little bit. If you're wanting, he said, if it's me, I'm going to work to work. I'm going to go to work to bust my butt. I'm not going to work to take it easy. I go to work and work hard so that I can have an exceptional lifestyle. And that really stuck with me.
And I'll piggyback on that topic. So my first initial coaching form, I completed it a couple weeks after. I was a little bit late, and I had already been in the practice for a couple weeks, and the most overwhelming thing for me was checking 2 hygienists. I was like, I cannot do this long term. It's way too many hygiene checks. I'm a new grad, and I'm checking 2 hygienists right away, and it was just way too much. And then come to working with Justin and kind of getting your exams to be a lot easier by working with your staff and your hygienists and everything, then all of a sudden you're diagnosing a lot more in each exam while exerting much less effort. And then we add a 3rd hygienist and it doesn't feel like a lot, but it just, that growth in the time that you're working and kind of improving and working on these things, it makes a big difference on your lifestyle. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, what at one point felt very overwhelming. Like, now, did the 2 hygienists thing really bother you?
No, I mean, it's completely normal at this point.
Yeah. So it comes to show like how far you can come by just doing what makes you uncomfortable, even though it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And can I just point out, I mean, I think in this conversation that we've had, there's been several times where either you or I have pointed out times where we've had to do something difficult or make some kind of a decision that, because of coaching, we've had to kind of place some trust. But and a lot of times it's something that you don't really understand or completely believe until you take the leap and implement it. And after you do that, then you really kind of see the benefits. But without having a coach or someone to really say, hey, I think this really could work for you, you may never end up doing those things and end up with just an average practice and average lifestyle.
Yeah. And like, I'll finish up that thought. You guys are my coach, you and Justin. Paul Goodman, great friend of mine, is I call him my dental therapist. And he kind of always has this thing. He's like, dentists just need to try shit, because they're always wanting the answer before they take the test. Like, you want to see the 2 hygienist thing work out. You want it to not be stressful, and you want to get the benefits before you ever do it. So I think at some point you need some mentorship, some guidance, and somebody to tell you what the best thing is for your situation, to trust them, and then just know that at the end you're going to believe it too.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and finish up there. I think it's been a great episode, and I apologize if I got off topic. That's something I try not to do, but with Derek, there was a few things I really wanted to talk about.
Yeah. No, really appreciate it, George.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.